Long before collard greens became synonymous with the American South, they belong to a much older agricultural story rooted along the Mediterranean coast, where early civilizations cultivated hardy, leafy vegetables capable of surviving cold seasons and poor soil. Members of the brassica family, collard greens were valued not for refinement or luxury, but for reliability. They grew where other crops failed and endured when conditions were uncertain, embedding themselves in cultures that understood survival as a disciplined practice daily. As trade routes expanded and empires rose, these greens traveled. Greek and Roman farmers cultivated and documented brassica varieties, praising their resilience and usefulness. Over time, collard-like greens spread across Europe, becoming staples among peasants and laborers whose lives depended on food that could withstand long winters and physical strain. From Europe, collard greens crossed into Africa through centuries-old trade connections linking the Mediterranean world to North and West Africa, later accelerated by European expansion. Though not indigenous to the continent, collards entered food systems already centered on leafy greens, where African cooks absorbed them into a culinary philosophy shaped by patience, balance, and nourishment. Before collard greens ever appeared in African American kitchens, Africans, particularly in West and Central Africa, were already deeply accustomed to cooking a wide range of dark, hearty, leafy greens. These leaves were thick, often bitter, and required patience rather than speed. As a result, the techniques used to prepare them were already well established. Tough leaves were softened through slow, low cooking. Bitterness was understood not as a flaw, but as a starting point to be balanced with seasoning and time. Greens were paired with fats, aromatics, and protein to create fullness, while the cooking liquid itself was valued as nourishment rather than waste. Nothing from the pot was discarded because everything carried purpose. This familiarity made the adoption of collard greens not only easy, but intuitive. European colonists planted the seeds throughout the southern colonies, where climate and soil allowed them to thrive. When Africans encountered collards in the Americas, they did not treat them as foreign vegetables. They recognized a leaf that followed familiar rules. Collard greens were large, fibrous, and bitter, capable of being harvested repeatedly and sustaining life when cooked properly. To African cooks, this was not strange food. It was a leaf that behaved correctly, new in name, but familiar in nature, ready to be transformed through knowledge already carried across the Atlantic. The leaves were simmered slowly, seasoned deeply, and paired with smoked meats that added both calories and flavor, turning a humble crop into sustenance capable of supporting life under relentless labor. As collards cooked, their essence seeped into the water below, producing what came to be known as collard greens liquor, or pot liquor. Thick with flavor and concentrated with vitamins and minerals drawn from the leaves, this broth became nourishment in its own right. In kitchens shaped by deprivation, discarding such a liquid was unthinkable. Pot liquor reflected an African understanding that sustenance could exist beyond solid food, reinforced by the careful layering of smoked meats, aromatics, and seasoning, and completed by cornbread dipped into the bowl, ensuring that nothing of value was lost. After emancipation, collard greens followed Black Americans into freedom, moving from plantation kitchens into tenant farms, backyard gardens, churchyards, and small plots carved out of marginal land. For many newly freed families, collards were not merely familiar, they were practical. The plant thrived in less than ideal soil, tolerated heat and cold, and could be harvested repeatedly throughout the year. In a period marked by economic exclusion, sharecropping, and food insecurity, collard greens became a quiet form of self-reliance, allowing Black households to feed themselves even when resources were scarce and land ownership remained elusive. Their value extended beyond availability. Collard greens were dense with nourishment at a time when medical care and balanced diets were often out of reach. Low in calories, yet rich in essential nutrients, collards provided calcium for bones, folate for cellular health, and high concentrations of vitamins A, C, and K. Regular consumption supported digestion, strengthened vision, reinforced cardiovascular health, and sustained bodies worn by labor and stress. In this way, collard greens functioned as preventative care long before such language existed, reinforcing survival not only through fullness, but through health. Over time, this nutritional reliability deepened their cultural meaning. What began as a crop of necessity became a symbol of continuity, collective memory, and inherited wisdom. Collard greens represented the ability to endure, adapt, and care for one another using what the land would yield. Nowhere was this transformation more clearly expressed than at the turning of the year. On New Year's Eve and New Year's Day, Black American households across the South, and eventually across the country, developed a ritualized meal rooted in intention rather than habit. At the center of that table sat collard greens, long associated with endurance and survival, now elevated into symbols of money, prosperity, and financial growth. Their deep green color echoed paper currency, while their slow, deliberate cooking reflected the patience and endurance Black families historically relied upon to survive oppression and economic exclusion. What began as a survival food evolved into a ritualized hope for stability and improvement in the year ahead. Surrounding the collard greens were foods that reinforced the same language of continuity and forward motion. Black-eyed peas, dependable during slavery and Reconstruction, symbolized coins, abundance, and the belief that beginning the year with sustenance ensured resilience and that one would not go hungry. Cornbread, golden and grounding, represented harvest, foundation, and self-sufficiency. Its color evoking wealth, while its substance reminded families that prosperity required something solid beneath it. Pork, often smoked or cured, symbolized progress and celebration, rooted in the belief that pigs move forward rather than backward, carrying the hope that the new year would do the same. Together, this New Year's meal formed a quiet economic theology with collard greens at its core. The ritual was not superstition alone, but preparation, a declaration that prosperity was something cultivated through patience, care, and belief. Often prepared alongside observances like the Night Watch, commemorating the Emancipation Proclamation, the meal fused spiritual reflection with material intention. In lifting a forkful of greens at the year's turning, Black families were not merely honoring tradition. They were rehearsing survival, affirming endurance, and setting the table for the future. Today, collard greens remain an essential part of the African American experience, anchoring holidays, church gatherings, and family tables across generations. Mediterranean in origin, European in transmission, African in technique, and Black American in meaning, they embody centuries of movement and adaptation. In the leaves, there is geography. In the broth, there is endurance. And in the New Year's ritual, there is a quiet declaration that prosperity is not only hoped for, but intentionally prepared. Collard greens are not owned by any single community, nor confined to one region or table. They are cooked in kitchens across America, prepared by families of many backgrounds who value their flavor, versatility, and nourishment. But for African Americans, collard greens carry a weight that extends beyond taste. They are tied to histories of forced migration, survival under constraint, and knowledge preserved when little else could be kept. What may appear elsewhere as a side dish functions within Black culture as a vessel of memory, resilience, and spiritual continuity. The meaning is layered, shaped by generations who relied on these leaves not simply to eat, but to endure, to heal, and to mark time itself.
We appreciate the fact that you stayed until the end. Thank you for spending time with us, and don't forget to like this video. Also, make sure you subscribe so that you never miss a video. Bye for now. We will see you tomorrow.